welcome to Quest for Truth. Your hosts, Douglas Hamp and Rob Skiba. We're excited to be with you today. We want to thank everyone for being back with us. We're having a good time. And as we've said before, the whole point of this is not that we have all the answers, because we don't, but it's really two guys that love the Word of God. We're talking about it. And, we just want to let people know that there's a lot to discover. So, this is your chance. If you have questions, we'd love to hear from you. It'd be good to just give us a kind of a heads up on that if you have any questions. But this is one that we've both been thinking about and wanted to just kind of dive in. So, all right, basically what we're going to start with is Matthew 24:28. Rob, this one has given me a lot of trouble over the years. I haven't really been able to figure it out. So I'll read it, and then we'll talk about it. Okay. So the context here: Jesus is coming back. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be dark, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all will see the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory, etc. Okay, so where should we start? You want to start, or shall I start? Or what are the different positions that people have seen about this verse? And I'll give the floor to you, and then you can kind of tell people what you think there.
Okay, well, I'm going to take this in a little bit different direction than probably most people would. This is that chapter where the disciples came up to Jesus and they said, "Lord, what's it going to be like? What are the signs of your coming going to be? What should we be looking for?" And so Jesus gives them a whole bunch of things that they should be looking for. And then you get down to the verses that you just looked at, talking about different, false Christs and false prophets and stuff like that shall show great signs and wonders in verse 24. And he goes on to say, "Behold, I have told you before," in King James. Now, some of the other ones, some of the other translations, basically that verse is like, "Pay attention, guys. I'm about to tell you something." He's like, listen up. That verse 25 right there is inserted there for Jesus to get their attention. And he says in verse 26, "Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, Behold, he's in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he's in the secret chambers, believe it not." And then he tells them what they should be looking for in verse 27, "For as the lightning comes out of the east and shines even unto the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be." And then there's that verse 28, "For wheresoever the carcass is, there will the eagles be gathered together." Well, after doing my research for my first book, Babylon Rising, and the First Shall Be Last, I've said it before, I was inspired by the works of Peter Goodgame, in particular his online book, which you can access on the internet at redmoonrising.com. And it's his book, The Giza Discovery. I was actually doing an unrelated search looking for something else, and I ended up in a Google search, landed kind of right in the middle of his book, right about the time he was given the punchline of his thesis. And I'm like, whoa, this is incredible. And then at the same time, let's see if I have it here. Yeah. Tom Horn's book, Apollyon Rising, came out. And when Apollyon Rising came out, he was also building on the work of Peter Goodgame and others. There's certainly been a number of people that have gone down the same path regarding Osiris and the connection to Orion, Apollo, and biblically speaking, Nimrod, and building a case for him as the Antichrist. So right as I got a hold of that revelation, I was looking at that and researching it for myself. I really actually got on board with it. I couldn't find any flaws in that thesis at all, really. And so then I started looking for other evidence in the historical account. And more recently, I found that in 1999, Dr. Zahi Hawass, which is one of the most renowned Egyptologists in the world, was poking around the Giza Plateau and found that between the center pyramid and the Sphinx, he found basically what everybody thought was a watering well, and got the idea to pump the water out of it. Found it. He went down about 100 feet and found a chamber that had 6 sarcophagus, little enclosures for sarcophagus. But where the 7th one would be, it was actually another tunnel that went down even further. And they went down and discovered what they believed to be the tomb of Osiris, which was a really wild-looking place. It's basically a moat of water surrounding a square island that had 4 pillars, one on each end at the corner of the square. They had ancient Egyptian hieroglyphic writing on it that many speculate to have been instructions for resurrection. And in the middle of that square island was another moat of water, a rectangular moat of water surrounding about a 10-foot long granite sarcophagus. And they said this is the tomb of Osiris. Well, I just read, Peter Goodgame's work, as well as Tom Horn and a number of other scholars, connecting Nimrod to Osiris. So I'm going, okay, they found a secret chamber. They called it that, the secret chamber of Osiris's tomb. And then flash forward a few years later, 2003, in April, archaeologists digging around the desert of Iraq found the body of Gilgamesh. And so I started looking at that verse right there. He says, well, if they say he's in the desert, Gilgamesh was found in the desert, go not forth. They say, behold, he's in the secret chambers, believe it not. Well, they found the secret chamber. And then he says this thing about the carcass and the eagles. And I started to think about my time in the military, because 1 month after finding that carcass in the desert, our military set up the military occupation phase in Iraq, and the first thing our troops did was raid the Museum of Baghdad. And there's something like 170,000 items were stolen. Most of them returned, but of the 3,000 that were not returned, they all dealt with cuneiform tablets dealing with resurrection in the afterlife. So, as Arsenio Hall would say, it's things that make you go, and made me go, and looking at what our military was doing over there. And then I had a picture of myself in my Class A uniform at basic training, at saluting. And I'm looking at my uniform, and I'm recalling what was on my uniform. And I was literally covered with eagles from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. Eagles on my hat, eagles on my patches, eagles on my buttons, eagles on the sole of my shoes. Eagles were everywhere. And I thought, wow, could it be that Jesus was looking forward in time prophetically, seeing a body pulled out of the desert, loaded into a secret chamber surrounded by a bunch of eagle-wearing individuals? Made me look at that verse and say, I think that's where America is in prophecy, in Matthew 24:28.
Wow, that's it's very persuasive. I remember the first time I heard you say that, I thought it was very, very compelling, and I applaud you for putting together a lot of dots. Like I said, this is something that has been plaguing me for quite a while, because I've taught on that passage, and I've come to that passage, and I just don't know what to do with it. I'm like, well, I'm not sure, and I'd say, well, here's what Rob Skiba thinks, but as I've been preparing my book, The Edge of Eternity, and I am working out the second coming, what that looks like, just taking all the verses that I can possibly find and discovering a lot more than I thought were actually there, trying to put these together. And I have a different perspective. And, again, just for our listeners out there, Rob and I are good friends, but we don't see eye to eye on everything, and that's okay. The goal here is ultimately truth. I want to know the truth. Rob wants to know the truth, and we presume you want to know the truth too. And so what we're going to do, Rob has presented his case. I'm going to present my case, and this will be something where ultimately none of us will know the real truth until Jesus comes, right? Because then we get to see it actually played out. So, but until then, we're gonna share our perspectives. And what I was been looking at is kind of exciting concerning the second coming, and I'll try to do it quickly if I'm able. And Rob, you may just want to move your mic down just a little bit. We're getting a little bit of feedback there, buddy. Thanks. But so when the Lord Jesus comes back, the veil between heaven and earth passes away. Maybe you didn't know there was a veil between heaven and earth. It's actually quite a huge concept. And I'm going to throw out just a few verses for people to go and to take a look at, because I don't want to get too much sidetracked on that. But we do have Isaiah 64:1, oh, that you would rend the heavens and come down. We have Isaiah 34:4, that the heavens are going to recede like a scroll. Revelation 6:14, the sky is going to recede like a scroll. 2 Peter 3:10, the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with great noise, etc. and we have the heavens opening. We see that in Ezekiel chapter 1. We see it in Revelation chapter 19. Jesus, when he's just coming up out of the water from being baptized, the heavens open and the Holy Spirit descends like a dove. So when the heavens pass away, that is the veil between heaven and earth. Isaiah 25:7, on this mountain the Lord will swallow up the face of the covering that covers all peoples and the veil that is over all nations. So the veil is going to go away. When that veil goes away, Jesus comes back in flaming fire, taking vengeance on those who reject the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. 2 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 7 and 8. So, we see this epic battle coming. And then in Joel, it says, prepare for war. Wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near. Let them come near. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. I mean, God is just like, all right, it's coming, all right. Let the nations be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. We see as it goes on in Joel chapter 3, put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, go down, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. And this is then followed up by what we have in Revelation chapter 14. Thrust in your sharp sickle and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe. And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles for 1,600 furlongs. So, first of all, to understand this is that Armageddon is not going to take place up in the Jezreel Valley, up in the Megiddo area. If you've ever been up there, you'll be incredibly underimpressed when you go to see the Valley of Megiddo, because if it means the mountain of Megiddo, which is the almost unanimous interpretation of that, then you'd expect to see a mountain there, okay? But what you see is kind of a bump on a pancake. There's really nothing there to speak of. There is something called a tel Megiddo. Now, a tel is not a mountain. Even though you can go up on it, if there were snow, you could slide down it in the winter. But it's not a mountain. It's a tel is where you've had a city that's been destroyed, and then another city was built on top of that, which was later destroyed, until eventually it makes this mound, and that's called a tel. So there's something called Tel Megiddo there, but there is no mountain. The area. And again, I discussed this in my research. I think it's actually Armageddon. Arema means a heap or a pile of harvested grain, like a sheaf. That's the terminology that we see used in Joel, we see used in Malachi, and it's this idea of taking the sickle and harvesting the earth. So again, that's all over the place. So basically, Jesus comes back. His feet touch down on the Mount of Olives. There's a remnant of Jewish people that are waiting for him. They appear to be in the valley of Jehoshaphat. They're in the Kidron Valley, waiting for him to come back. And as they are waiting, the forces of Antichrist are now coming from them on both sides. It says from the right and from the left that it says the governors of Judah are going to be filled with this power, so that they will be like fire in the wood brand, fire in the wood pile, that they're going to have fire. I understand that as fire actually coming out of their hands, just like Jesus. He's going to have rays of light coming out of his hands, per Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 4. They will have this supernatural power, so that the feeble among them are like David, and the mighty will be like the angel of the Lord. So they're holding back the forces of Antichrist. Jesus touches down on the Mount of Olives. It splits, and then it says, you will flee through my mountain valley as far as Azal. So they're going to flee through. This is the second coming, or this is of course the second. This is the crossing of the Red Sea all over again. All right, but this one's going to be even cooler than the first one, because the first one, the Jews got through, the forces of Pharaoh come, and then the walls of water crash down upon them. But this time, instead of the walls of water, or in this case, rock, falling down upon them, Jesus himself is going to interpose himself between his people, Israel, and the attackers, or the forces of Antichrist. And then he's going to bloody his garments, as we see in Isaiah 63. Who is this who comes from Edom with dyed garments from Bozrah? This is this one who is glorious in his apparel, traveling in the greatness of strength. I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Why is your apparel red, and your garments like one who treads in the winepress? Isaiah asks, I have trodden the winepress alone, and from the peoples no one was with me. For I have trodden them in my anger, and trampled them in my fury. Their blood is sprinkled upon my garments, and I have stained all my robes, for the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed has come, he says. So that right there, we see that there's going to be this epic battle. Jesus is going to just start squashing these people, again, who are hybrids, incidentally. They're Nephilim, because they've taken the mark of the beast. They've been transformed, and now they're trying to destroy God's people, Israel. Jesus comes, and he begins to fight for them. He's going to fight as a man fights on the day of battle. He's now fighting for Israel. And it's really amazing, the passage in Micah 4:12. Now also many nations have gathered against you, who say, let her be defiled, and let our eye look upon Zion. But they do not know the thoughts of the Lord, nor do they understand his counsel, for he will gather them like sheaves to the threshing floor. So God has a trap in mind for these antagonistic forces. So when you start to put it all together, you have Jesus. Now he comes back. He's interposed himself between the bad guys and Israel. He starts to fight against these bad guys. He starts to cut them down. Blood is splattering everywhere. He then begins to tread upon them like a man treading grapes. And the carnage is so incredible that they're just bodies everywhere. And that is why we read in Revelation that it says that the angel is going to call to the animals, to the birds. And he says, and the winepress was trampled outside of the city, and the blood horse with the horse's bridle. Okay, so there's lots and lots of blood, lots of bodies. And then in Revelation 19, an angel calls to all the birds, come and gather together for the supper of the great God, that you may eat the flesh of kings and the flesh of captains, etc. And then, so after I had put all that together, and I came to this verse of eating the flesh of kings, etc., then it began to make sense to me what Jesus was saying. So also will the coming of the Son of Man be, for wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. So what I submit is it's not a veiled reference to the United States, though that would be kind of cool. But especially with them finding Osiris and Nimrod, that would be pretty awesome. But I don't think that's the case. The argument I want to make is that Jesus has slaughtered so many people the day that he comes back that an angel now invites the birds who are flying overhead. Incidentally, I believe that the second coming is going to coincide with the fall feast. I think we might see eye to eye on that, Rob. I'm not sure,
Definitely,
but
yeah, for
yeah.
sure.
So and I would argue that this is probably happening at the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. All right, Yom HaKippurim. That this is happening on that day. Now, it just so happens that when birds migrate from Europe and from Asia, when they fly down south to Africa, they funnel themselves right over Israel. It's really incredible. I mean, you'd think that the birds from Spain or from France, would just they take a shortcut and fly over the Mediterranean Sea, but they don't do it. They fly over land, and then they all come together and they funnel right through Israel. It's a real problem for the Israeli Air Force because they're trying, they have very little airspace up there, right? And they're trying to practice their maneuvers, and you got these millions and millions of birds. So this would make sense that there's millions of birds flying overhead at this time, and there's all this carnage, and of course the earth has been absolutely devastated. I mean, they're going to be hungry anyway because there's nothing to eat. Everything has been turned to blood. So now you got this invitation, hey, come get some food, have as much as you want. So wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. I submit that is actually talking about all the millions and millions of bodies that have been just slaughtered by Jesus, and now it's inviting the eagles to come.
Interesting. Well, just looking up okay, let me back up. Let me look at that verse again, because it looks like you are taking us right to the end of the story.
Yes.
And that would... the problem I have with that is the next verse says, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So I don't see that he's touched down yet in the chronology here. And looking at the subject before verse 28 appears to be, hey guys, listen up, I'm telling you about the Antichrist here, what you should be looking for and what you shouldn't be looking for. Right. And when I look up the Greek word for carcass, it appears to be in the singular.
Yes, but here's my response. You have Job 39:30. It says, his young ones feast on blood. He'll be found wherever there's a carcass. So it's talking about birds of carrion, perhaps the eagle. This is the word atos. It could be eagle. It could also be vulture. That's a possibility. We see that in Aristotle's writings. So Historia Animalia, to be exact. So vulture could be used in that case.
And some English translations actually have vulture right there in Matthew 24:28.
Right.
We're looking at the King James, which says eagle.
Right, yeah. Well, the passage here in Job 39:30, it's talking about a general principle. Wherever there's a body, there will be a bird of carrion, okay, or an eagle or whatever it is, okay. So,
but my contention is that the previous verses are telling you about the Antichrist, which is a singular individual. And that's why I would say the carcass singular is a reference to the singular false Christ that is, and there's going to be false Christs plural and false prophets plural, but we know that there's going to be one that actually is the Antichrist.
Well,
and Jesus hasn't touched down yet. After he touches down, it's going to be bad.
Well, on the other hand,
want to get this.
I'm having a little trouble hearing Rob. I'm sorry about that.
Oh no!
Yes, the joys of internet radio. We're trying.
Am I still here?
Yeah, you're still here, man. Yeah, and I'm even hardwired. I'm not sure what more to do. I'm supposed to have this incredibly fast connection, so I don't know.
Yeah, likewise.
Maybe there's a problem in there. But
I don't know if I got cut off or not. But and again, this is a subject for another show. We have to put a whole show into this. But Paul says we meet him in the clouds at the harpazo, and the only time Jesus said he's going to be in the clouds, is clear as day, is immediately after the tribulation of those days. I'm going to be in the clouds.
Oh my goodness, boy, this is going to get complicated.
That's another.
Well,
let's say we need another show just for that.
Oh, I know, man. I was trying to leave the rapture out of this.
If we're going to talk about the last days, man, we have to talk about the rapture.
Oh, the rapture's too complicated.
But we'll save that for another show.
You'll never make anybody happy.
To me, it's not complicated at all. Jesus said, "Hey, guess what, guys? I'll tell you when I'm going to be in the cloud."
Fair enough.
That verse right there, I used to be a pre-trib guy, hardcore, wrote books about it and scripts and everything, and I used to have to tuck that verse away, pretend verse 29 doesn't exist, Sharpie or highlighter kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
I can't get away from it anymore. But again, looking at the chronology, though, the context appears to be looking for a false Christ, and of course we know there's going to be a false Christ, the Antichrist.
Right.
But he hasn't touched down yet, so I have a problem with your interpretation because of the chronology of this one chapter.
Well, okay, I hear what you're saying, and I think you have to consider that the chronology kind of comes and goes. I mean, let's consider some things here. You have 27, for as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. Well, that's talking about the second coming. I mean, that's when the clouds have gone away, the sky has gone away. Here comes Jesus, yes?
Sure.
Okay. So wherever the carcass
yes, I would agree with that. But
you know,
the caveat to that would be I would say he's saying this is what you should be looking for. Don't worry about rumors in the desert. Don't worry about the secret chambers.
Yeah.
The way I'm coming back. Everybody's going to see it in the clouds. That's
I agree.
I would
totally.
That.
But all I'm saying is if we're going to talk about chronology of this passage, I don't think that we can make a hard and fast rule that, well, you know, A, then B, then C, you know, because he seems to repeat himself, you know, again, to use the motif of a different camera angle. He says, okay, look at it from this angle, now from this angle, right? So, you know, I think, but, you know, those two together, 27 and 28, I mean, just if we did do a chronology, you've got him coming back, and then you got this whole carcass thing. But, you know, I mean,
it's really bizarre because, listen up, guys, I'm about to tell you something. 26, he mentions the desert and the secret chambers. Then he says, okay, this is the way I'm coming back. I ain't coming back that way.
Well, look,
and then whatever the carcass is,
right? Okay,
singular. There, the eagles had together. So, well, because I would liken this. I would link that to Revelation 13, because Revelation 13 is where we find that the beast has a mortal head wound that is healed. So we've got a carcass that has to resurrect. In Revelation 13, and that's where I would marry 28 with 13.
I put the death of Antichrist in the Holy of Holies, as it were, you know, whatever you want to call that place. That's where I would suspect that it's going to happen. I don't know if I can prove that absolutely from Scripture, but he does go into the holy place. He declares himself to be God. At the same time, that's when Satan's getting booted out of heaven, right? So there's a lot going on there. But yeah, I mean, I think 28 is talking about the very end. I mean, this is after everything has happened. I mean, look at some other language, and you know, depending on where you want to put Ezekiel 39, the Gog and Magog war, and all this is another issue, I suppose. But he says, "Tell all of the birds."
Where do you put it? Where do you put?
Well, I see the Gog and Magog war as before the time of Jacob's trouble. So probably before the beginning of the 7 years.
The 20-year time frame of Jacob's trouble, or the 7 years or the 3.5 year?
Yeah, the 3.5 year. Yeah, I appreciate the 20-year thing. I mean, I hope you're wrong. You could be right, but we'll have to see on that one.
Yeah, I'm only trying to use Scripture to interpret itself. The time of Jacob's trouble in Genesis.
I am too.
31.
I know. Oh, I got you, man.
But
well, look,
Genesis 31. Because everybody's like, the Jacob's trouble is 7 years or 3.5 years. I'm like, wait a minute, it's 21. It's 20 years in Genesis.
Yeah. Well, he did have trouble for 20 years. There's no question about it. Well, we'll go to Jeremiah 7 next. I think that'll be a good thing to talk about. But Ezekiel 39, he says, "Tell all of the birds and the wild beasts to come and gather together and participate in this sacrifice that I'm going to make for you. This great sacrifice will take place on the mountains of Israel." So here you have, you've got these birds that are going to have another feast, right? So, that sure seems to be talking about just, what I consider to be a very straightforward kind of deal. That it's not having to say, well, it could be the United States, because I think the weakness in your interpretation is that you're having to figure out who. First of all, does eagles always mean eagles? Could it mean vultures? Because if it's vultures, then America's out, right? But if it is an eagle, which it could be.
Oh, but if you're a King James only guy, Well,
I'm not. I'm sort of into the Hebrew and the Greek kind of thing,
Oh man, you're toast, man. You just
I
admitted
know.
you're not
I
King James
know.
only. I'm not
Yeah,
listening to you
it's
anymore.
fine. It's fine. Um, yeah, too funny. But there's a number of places that talk about the bodies being given over to the birds, for them to eat. So I think we have to take that into consideration. And so what
Well,
I would
yeah,
argue.
I definitely do. The only problem is, and this is my a soldier guy with eagles all over him. My only problem is in the following verse, still in the clouds. He hasn't touched down yet.
Yeah, I see your point. I would argue that that is a reiteration of what he's already said, because I mean we see
Okay,
reiterations all.
so okay, so then he's getting ahead, then he's back, and he's telling the story over again. Is that what
Yeah,
he's doing?
I mean it's all over in
Okay,
Revelation. It's all over. I mean you got, I mean we see that. You're cool with that.
sure.
you know.
Well, yes, I am cool with it in Revelation. I don't see it in Matthew, but maybe it's just a matter of interpretation.
Well, consider this. You've got Deuteronomy 28:26. Your dead bodies will be for food for the birds of the sky and the wild animals of the earth. Uh, you know,
Sure.
as well as Goliath says that, and then David says it right back to him. I'm going to take off your head, and I'll give your
Yeah.
bodies to the
Well, I mean,
Philistines, the birds.
yeah, to be fair, I've repeatedly said that I take the scriptures literally, except for when it says otherwise. So, to hold myself accountable to that claim, this would be birds eating a carcass, no doubt about it. In verse 28, looking at it as symbolic, well, certainly could see it. Just coincidentally related to a body pulled out of the desert and perhaps loaded into a secret chamber. That would have to be allegorical, metaphorical, you know, symbolic, whatever. So, yeah, to your point, taking a literal interpretation, I could see that certainly. The chronology looks all over the map to me to go in that direction.
Okay, let's consider that. Let's consider. Let's see if um, I'll defend my thesis here. I'll defend it. All right. So first of all, he's talking. Who are the elect? Maybe that's another question. We have to go
Oh
back.
boy,
There's so many things. No, but see, this is why it gets tricky, isn't it? Because
it is.
we come to the text, and we may not even be looking for eschatology, but we already have a preconceived notion of who the elect are. My position. I say that the elect, when it's plural, it's talking about the Jews. And I defend that in a paper and a video. People can check out why God did not elect Calvinists. All right. But the whole election thing, here in Matthew 22, unless those days are shortened, no flesh would be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Well, this is all again, it's the time of Jacob's trouble, right? It's not the time of New York's trouble. It's not the time of Timbuktu trouble. This is the time of Jacob's trouble. Now, it's not to say it's a party on the rest of the earth, but Satan's anger is focused against Israel. So he's trying to destroy them first. Satan's principle is easy: destroy the Jew first and then the Gentiles. That's his modus operandus. So he's trying to destroy the Jews first, but because of them, those days will be shortened. All right. Now, keep in mind that there was a guy named Shabtai Tzvi who was a Jew. He lived in 1666. That's the day that he declared himself to be the Messiah, June 18th, 1666. And half of the world's Jewish population believed him. He had this false prophet named Nathan of Gaza, and they believed it because they were desperate. They're looking for the Messiah. They're yearning for this guy to come. There have been altogether 49 Jewish messiahs, people who have made the claim of being Messiah. Obviously, we know as followers of Jesus, there's only one true person who can claim that, but people have claimed it. And Bar Kokhba made the same claim, or at least his prophet made it for him, Rabbi Akiva. But this is also, it's not just to encourage the Christian. This is to let the Jews know what's going on, because they have bought into a lot of these false Christs, unfortunately, and they've paid the price for it, unfortunately. And look, when the Antichrist comes, yeah, he wants to deceive the whole world. I have no issue with that. But he also wants to deceive the Jews. That's why he goes to Israel. That's why he goes to the Temple Mount. That's why he has them, or provides them to rebuild a temple. And he goes into that temple. I mean, why not just go to some other place? The thing is, he's interested in that piece of real estate, and he wants these Jews to be onlookers while he's declaring himself to be God. There's something important about those components. And I believe it's because you have a portal between the Jerusalem above and the Jerusalem below. And if he can kind of stick his finger up, in that special place, he's kind of like entering through the portal and, kind of laying hold to God's throne, as it were. I mean, that's maybe what he thinks is going to happen. And as a result, Satan and the boys get kicked out of heaven because of this heinous crime, among other things. I mean, I think there's more to it than that, but just to speak simply. So that's the first thing, all right. And now you have a warning. If he says he's over here in the desert, don't go. If he's in the inner rooms, don't believe it. Because when the Messiah comes, as lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man. And keep in mind, there's going to be lots of dead bodies, and that because of all these dead bodies, when at the Messiah's coming, there's going to be these birds of carrion, or vultures, or eagles, whatever they are. So, and then he goes on, and I would argue that he's now repeating. He's going to the end, and then he's coming back immediately after the tribulation of those days, and he tells us what it looks like. And then we see in verse 31 he's going to send out his angels. And then verse 32, now he tells us again, hey, learn this parable of the fig tree. Here's how you're going to know what is all coming. He talks about heavens and earth passing away. No one knows that day. And then he tells us again in 37, hey, it's going to also be like this, like the days of Noah. Okay, so here's why you shouldn't get deceived, because when the Son of Man comes back, it's going to be like the days of Noah. When the Son of Man comes back, it's going to be like the lightning from the east to the west, and there'll be tons of birds there eating on dead bodies. When the Son of Man comes back, it will be like the fig tree. All right, so there's these different ways to test to see if it's really the days that if Messiah has come back. Is it like the days of Noah? No. Do we see a bunch of birds chowing down on a bunch, millions of bodies? No. Do we see is it the fig tree? Well, actually, we're in the season, so we're getting there. But those are all the things to look for when the Son of Man comes back. I give the mic back to you.
I would. Yeah, I definitely hear what you're. Okay, yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. I would say that beginning in verse 3, he sat upon the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us when these will be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the world." Just as a little aside, I would think that the first sign would be a massively huge sign to mention would be millions of people disappearing. But he didn't say that. Regardless of who you think the elect are. First thing, millions of people are going to disappear. I know you guys believe in dispensationalism, so you think I'm just talking to Jews right now, but even if a bunch of Gentiles disappeared, you'd think Jesus would say it, but he doesn't. So the story continues from that point on, I believe, in a fairly chronological, until you get down to verse 32. So where you see kind of a reset button over at right around 27 or 28, I see that button pushed around verse 32. I see everything up to that point in a chronological order. And then I see now learn the parable of the fig tree. And he goes on and tells that little story. And then he tells the story about, it's going to be like the days of Noah. He talks about, there'll be one woman grinding at the mill. So, I mean, he's got several resets after that. But in my opinion, anyway, looking at the chronology here, I would say one straight chronological story up until verse 31. And you know what? We both have two different interpretations of it. We are for truth, and so those of you who are listening, you can take what Doug has said and chew on that for a while. Take what I've said and chew on it for a while, and then hopefully, maybe together we can all come to a conclusion on it. What's happening here. But to tie it to a few other scriptures, if I was to say this, verse 28 is because I don't believe the Antichrist shows up until the fifth trumpet. We learn in Revelation 17 and Revelation 13, it says the beast comes from the bottomless pit. Not Kenya, not Hawaii, European Union, not the Vatican. It says he comes from the bottomless pit. He comes from the abyss. And he doesn't do that to the fifth trumpet, which I would say is pretty close to the midpoint if you subscribe to the 7-year period. Eyewitnesses minister for 3.5 years, 1,260 days. And then this Carcass is risen from the dead. And his first order of business is killing the two witnesses and going and having a seat in the temple. And I believe the only place to sit down in the temple would be on the Ark of the Covenant. So I believe that needs to be found. And then he reigns for 1,260 days after that, 3.5 years. So
let's talk about that.
If my thesis is true, well, let me just finish, because if my thesis is true regarding verse 28, if this Carcass is pulled out of the desert and loaded into a secret chamber, and let me pull up a screenshot of something here for you. I have this is from my blog, DiamondRisingBlog.com/thefirst.last.html. This right here, that's an artist's rendition of the tomb of Osiris. If that is in fact a resurrection chamber, as many believe that it is, then the Carcass that we're looking at in verse 28 may be what was pulled out of the desert and loaded into this thing. If that's the case, then we're looking at something happening in Revelation chapter 9, where a star falls from heaven that has the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. Where does the beast come from? It comes from the bottomless pit. So at that point, I believe, and maybe we can talk about this, Revelation chapter 1, what the star is and what's going on there, because I know we have a different point of view on that as well. But that's where I mean, looking at the chronology of things, that's where I would say it, because then, and my take on the restrainer, I don't believe the restrainer is the Holy Spirit. I believe the restrainer is in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, and it's Michael. It says, after Michael the Great basically watches over Jerusalem, goes up or rises. I believe that's a parallel to Revelation chapter 12, where where does he go? He leaves his military post in Jerusalem to go fight a war in heaven. That's where he goes. It says, then there will be tribulation as has never been before. So it's that individual, I believe, leaving that spot open for the Antichrist to go in, or the forces that be, or whatever. It's what makes it possible for the Antichrist to even enter Jerusalem and go into the temple and do this thing. So I see a lot of things. If what I'm saying is true, then this is the beginning of the midpoint, where a body's loaded into a secret chamber, where this thing falls down from heaven, has the keys to the shaft of the bottomless pit, releases Apollyon, who is Apollo, who is Osiris, Gilgamesh, Nimrod. He comes out, kills the two witnesses, goes in the temple. I see a lot converging on this one, because then it says immediately after the tribulation of those days. What days? Well, those are the days that after Michael leaves are going to be nothing like it. The sun's darkened, the moon's not going to give her light, and then the sign of Son of Man coming in heaven. He's in the clouds at this point. He hasn't touched down yet, and so that's where I would see this.
Yeah, and there are clearly some points that we agree on, which is great. Yeah, we don't want people to think that we don't agree on a lot of stuff.
We agree on more than we don't.
We really do. But it's the points where we disagree that make it interesting.
It's fun.
Yeah, it really is. First of all, Jeremiah 30 verse 7, alas, for the day is great, so that none is like it, and it is the time of Jacob's trouble, but he shall be saved out of it. I mean, you could argue that as 20 years, but I think you could also just talk about that there's a time coming that's going to be really, really ugly. And just to let people know, I don't believe that the Great Tribulation is 7 years. I used to think that. I think that the Great Tribulation is a period of 3.5 years, 42 months, 1,260 days. Scripture is replete with that number, and that is the
Now,
time when it gets super ugly.
let me say that I think I agree with you on that, because I see the last 1260 days that the beast is ruling as, without a doubt, the great tribulation. But it says after the testimony of the two witnesses, who witnessed for 1260 days.
Yes.
So
Right. Well, I mean,
do you see them happening in the previous 3.5 years?
well,
We just don't
yes,
call
I
it the
do.
Great Tribulation.
No, I think that that's going to be
Okay.
at the
Okay.
beginning
Well,
of the 7 years. I think it's the beginning of the 7 years. It's not technically called the time of the Great Tribulation. Pardon?
I agree with you that the Great Tribulation has defined as the last 3.5 years.
Yes, and I mean, and I think that the two prophets, witnesses, will come on the scene at the beginning of that 7 year period. I mean, I do think there is a 7 year period, but I think that is the period of call it the New World Order, where basically Antichrist is on the scene. He has made a treaty. I call it the Treaty of Many, and this has been brokered between the Jewish people and basically the world, or the many, and it's a covenant with death. We see that in Isaiah 28, that they're going to make a covenant with death and with Sheol, and they think that it's going to protect them from the overflowing scourge, though in the end of all things it's not going to do it. So
So how do you reconcile that with Revelation chapter 9? How do you reconcile that? If the beast doesn't come out until the fifth trumpet, how can he establish a 7-year treaty if he doesn't show up until the midpoint?
Well, I don't think that he shows up at the midpoint. I'd say he comes back at the midpoint. That he receives this mortal head wound, and that would be he goes in, he declares himself to be God. He is stabbed in the head with some kind of a sword. He then resurrects at that point, because what happens is the great star that falls from heaven is Satan. We see that in Revelation chapter 12, that a great war breaks out in heaven, and the dragon took a third of the stars with his tail. The stars, and if you look at the next verse, it says that, and the angels, Satan's angels, fell with him to the earth. All right, and that correlates with Revelation 6. 6:13, and the stars of heaven fell to the earth as a fig tree drops its late figs when it is shaken by a mighty wind. That also correlates with Revelation 8:10. Then the third angel sounded, and a great star fell from heaven. So the stars in general are the demons. The great star is Satan himself. And then when you go on to Revelation chapter 9, and I saw a star fallen from heaven. Okay, so this star has already fallen. This star fell. In other words, a star is an angel. Jesus was holding the 7 stars in his right hand, which are the 7 angels to the 7 churches. The stars is a reference to an angel. It's not a reference to those big gas giant things out in the middle of space. If one of those fell on the planet, the whole party would be over. Okay, I mean, there'd be nothing more to write about, because the earth would be obliterated. It would be vaporized and gone. Okay, every last person on the planet would be dead. So that would be, sort of a strange ending to the whole story. So it has to be. It's talking about fallen angels, and this fallen angel has already fallen. I saw a star fallen from the earth from heaven to the earth.
What translation are you using for that?
Because this one is the New King James, but
because King James says star fall. I saw a star fall from heaven.
No. I looked this up in the Greek. I read it in the Greek. It's not I saw a star fall from heaven, but fallen from heaven. Okay. So this is the past, or this the present perfect participle. All right. So that means he's fallen. It's not that he has fallen already. It's not I saw a star falling. That would be just a participle, but this is this is the perfect participle. All right. So the perfect means that I have done something, right? I have seen the new Star Trek movie. Okay, that means you already did it, for example. So here,
Okay, well, I'm looking at that right now, and you're more about this than I do, so I'm asking. But looking at the Bible.cc at the word pipto, if I'm saying it right,
yeah.
it means I fall under, I fall under, fall prostrate. It doesn't seem to be indicating that it's a past tense.
Well, that's because it's only giving you the lexical form. You have to look at the grammar.
Oh no, I am.
No, this has all the signs of a
Peptocota.
perfect. Yeah,
Peptocota
peptocota. Yeah, so that kappa right there, that's part of
makes it
the perfect,
past
and it has
tense.
what's called a reduplication at the beginning there. So the p epsilon there is your reduplication. All right. So this is a
Gotcha.
perfect. This is a perfect. It's not a participle. It's not a present tense. If it were just a participle, then you'd have a much stronger case. But this is a
Okay,
star
well,
that,
I have another question
yeah,
for you then. The way this renders star, it's aster,
yeah, astera, yeah.
which is feminine form,
It's
as
irrelevant,
opposed to
but it's
esteron.
irrelevant. It doesn't matter
Right.
though. Look, I speak Spanish, and every word in Spanish is either masculine or feminine. All right. Right now, I'm sitting in a
Sure,
seat.
but
Yeah. I'm sitting in
no, I
a
understand
silla,
that.
a chair. Just because the word is
Uh,
feminine doesn't mean anything about it. I mean, that'd be kind of weird.
well, okay,
Mesa, la
then
mesa
if
is feminine.
okay,
It doesn't, you know.
fair enough. But if that's the case, then the pronoun that follows, he, would also be irrelevant, wouldn't it?
Well, no, but it's well,
If the star is
yeah. I mean,
feminine, shouldn't
it's
the
staying.
pronoun be
Well, yeah, because it's staying with star. The star was
yeah,
given.
which is feminine. So
Sure.
should it not be if the star is feminine? Should the following pronoun autos be feminine as well?
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah. See, this is where I want to switch back here because I think something's going on here. When I looked at that, it says a star fallen from heaven.
Yeah.
It made me think of another scripture in Acts chapter 19, which records another. This the whole story where Paul is in Ephesus and they basically stirred up big trouble and they had a little city council meeting and the mayor of the city or whatever came out and he says in verse 34, Acts 19,
Yeah.
but when they knew that he was a Jew, all about the space of 2 hours cried out, "Great is Diana of the Ephesians, who is Artemis, who in the mythology is the sister of Apollo, who would in Sumerian would be Semiramis, sister of Nimrod. Great is Diana of the Ephesians." And when the town clerk had appeased the people, he said, "Ye men of Ephesus, what man is there that knoweth not how the city of Ephesus of the Ephesians is a worshiper of the great goddess Diana and of the image which fell?" And then King James says from Jupiter, but it says from heaven. And so I thought, well, wait a minute. Here's a story of a star falling from heaven in the form of Diana, Artemis of the Ephesians. And we covered Zechariah chapters 3 and 5. And if we skip on over to Zechariah chapter 5, you've got this very interesting story of this one side, a basket or an ephah, and it goes and touches down in Shinar. And Jim Wilhelmsen and a number of other people have done some tremendous research on this, basically describing this thing as, well, it sounds like a flying saucer, apparently.
Yeah, some people made the suggestion it's a nuclear warhead. It could be.
Well, yeah, I've heard that one too.
Yeah.
But if it is a flying saucer, just suggesting something here.
Yeah.
In this book right here by Oxford Press, this is the Myths of Mesopotamia. Oh, sorry, my phone's going off here. The Myths from Mesopotamia describes Ishtar, who is Ishtar, Isis, Semiramis, going up in a spaceship in the Epic of Gilgamesh. And you got characters like these right here that shows a woman. This is Ishtar right here. This is Inanna. This is Isis. They're all the same person, just different cultures talking about her. But she's a woman with wings. And you've got these two women in Zechariah 5 that have wings, and another one that's inside what appears to be a flying saucer with a lead cap that goes and touches down in the plains of Shinar, which is where Babylon was. So, I'm looking at that word in Revelation, then I saw a star, and it says stare, which is feminine, thinking that, well, that pronoun afterwards should be she, not he. And if that's the case, then, it's not the devil, but it could be the whore of Babylon.
Yeah.
Touching down in Shinar.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I'll give you a point for that. But I think when
Bingo.
Well,
I got a whole point.
I know. I'll give you a point. However, I would argue though that when you come to chapter verse 11, and they had the king over them, the angel of the bottomless pit.
Right.
I mean, you got chapter 12, right? Well, gives us a pretty strong correlation between the dragon and the stars that are with him, right? And then we're told, like I see in verse 4, he drew a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And then we're told in verse 7, see, now we have a repeat, but just from a different camera angle. War broke out in heaven, and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, right? And so the great dragon was cast out, so that serpent of old, the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world, he was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So the angels and the stars are exactly the same. Revelation chapter 1, Jesus is holding the 7 stars, astera, in his right hand, right hand, and then we're told that they are angels, right? So astera is feminine because it's just a feminine word. That's just how it is. And angels is masculine. So I don't know. I think what John is actually doing is he's looking forward to the guy that's really, who is this star? What's his name? His name is Abaddon or Apollyon. So I think you could actually, I would argue that the use of the masculine singular actually proves that it's talking about Apollyon, and it's identifying, the he here is not just some random star, but this entity that fell from heaven like a great star, who's called a star, is in fact Abaddon, and he is a he. He's not a she. So, and this is all yet
Abaddon's
future.
Coming up.
No, Abaddon's not
coming
coming up.
Down.
He's not coming up. He came
down.
Out of the bottomless
pit.
I disagree.
He's coming up out of the bottomless pit.
I disagree.
Okay, all right.
I don't think Apollyon or Abaddon.
Let's go back in Revelation 9 together.
Okay.
Okay, let's go back to Revelation 9:11. Okay. And they had a king over them, which is the angel of the bottomless pit.
Okay.
Whose name in the Hebrew tongue is Abaddon and the Greek is Apollyon.
Okay.
And Revelation 13 and 17 tells you the beast comes from the bottomless pit.
Okay.
So apply Apollyon or Abaddon to the dragon, to Lucifer, to Satan. When Satan getting cast out.
Right, but we already have
next couple chapters.
Right, but we have Abaddon elsewhere in Scripture. I mean, this is not unique to.
In reference, it is. In reference to Sheol, yes. Right here, the word appears. Let me put this up on the screen here. This is from blueletterbible.org. The word occurs 6 times in the Old Testament, always as a place name in the sense in which Sheol is a place name. It denotes in certain aspects the world of the dead as constructed in the Hebrew imagination. It is a common mistake to understand such expressions in a too mechanical way. Like ourselves, the men of the earlier ages had to use picture language when they spoke of the conditions that existed after death. However, their picturing of the matter may have differed from ours. In 3 instances, Abaddon is parallel with Sheol: Job 26:6, Proverbs 15:11, Proverbs 27:20. In one instance, it is a parallel with death, and one with the grave, and in the remaining instance, the parallel phrase is root out all mine increase. Job 28:22, Psalm 88:11, Job 31:12. So yeah, we do have reference to it in other places, but not in terms of a personal name.
Well, I think
like
you can.
as for the
Well, I don't
devil.
know. I mean, I don't think that's really the case. I mean, if you have, like you said there, Job 26, verse 6. I mean, I think that's a pretty powerful passage. Sheol is naked before him, and destruction has no covering. Look, I mean, you got Sheol.
But that's a place.
Well, okay, but how can it be thrown into the bottomless, or how can Sheol or Hades be thrown into the lake of fire? I mean, you know, you have that in Revelation. Well, is it, or is it actually somebody? Well, why? I mean, you're telling me that Abaddon here is actually a person, which I think it is in Revelation 9, but in Job 26, you're saying no, it's a place, or it's an idea.
Well, yeah, this is that we see in Revelation 9 that there's apparently verse 11 and in charge of that place. He's the angel of the bottomless pit, whose name in the Hebrew is Abaddon, and then the Greek has the name Apollyon, which to me is a home run, because Apollyon is just a derivative spelling of Apollo.
Right. So who would be the son of Apollo?
So it's telling.
I mean, Tom Horn makes a good case. I think he makes it right that the son of perdition, Apolia, the son of him is the Antichrist. So who would the father be? The father is going to be Satan.
Well, yeah, we know the Antichrist, the father of the Antichrist. So he is a son of Satan in that sense, certainly.
Well, I mean,
but Apollo, I guess I don't see anywhere that name is applied to the devil anywhere.
Well, he is a destroyer. I mean,
Where would we?
He was a murderer from the beginning.
Well, he comes to kill, steal, and destroy, but his name is not Apollo.
Well, he has a lot of names. I mean, what is his name then? What is his? Well, I don't know. It's definitely not Lucifer. It may be Halel. That's a possibility. But even then, it's a matter of, what is his real name? Well, it's definitely not Lucifer. I mean, he wasn't named Lucifer way back in the beginning, but it could be that it's Halel. That's a real possibility. So, hey, you know what? We're out of time, man. I mean, I'll give you the last word.
Oh man. Man, there's so much more we could talk about.
Oh, this was fun.
Yeah, there's nothing I could say that wouldn't require a lot more time, but yeah, certainly we've put a lot on the table for people to consider as we are on a quest for truth.
Yes,
it's not a matter of Doug being right. We both have opinions as we do our research, and all we're trying to do is share what we think, and hopefully you can learn something, and then someday share what you think as well. So thank you for joining again for Quest for Truth.